We're back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday. We're moving through another week. Some interesting stuff going on every week. Things get a little hotter and heavier around Donald Trump, and you can see it in the way he talks. He's starting to freak out now. He's telling the Republicans they need to impeach Joe Biden, that they need to shut down the country. He's even going online and threatening Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman with execution. He's losing his shit and he's got some trouble. And the things he's saying are going to cause him problems in the long run. Nothing ever happens as quickly as you hope it happens. You want immediate gratification. A lot of people thought at the moment that Joe Biden was inaugurated that they would put cuffs on Donald Trump and they would drag him off. Well, that's not how it's worked. But for those folks that say nothing's happening to Donald Trump, that's a little silly too. He's got a lot of shit happening to him, and he's feeling the pressure right at this point. My question always was, where do you draw the line with Donald Trump? I mean, what's too far? We had Judge Chutkan in Washington, D.C., and we have McAfee down in Georgia. They both told Donald Trump that when you go out there, you can't talk about the case, you can't threaten people, you can't try to taint the jury pool. But of course, he goes out and does that. We expect some kind of response from these judges, but we have yet to get any. And this is what I'm saying. Where's the line drawn? Where's the point where you say, okay, enough is enough. Now we've got to make Donald Trump accountable for the bullshit he's doing. And just the other day, what he did was he was mad at Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's actually retiring here shortly. And he made some comments and talked about him dealing with the Chinese, and everything he wrote was a lie. It was projection because it was things he was doing. But he basically suggested that what Mark Milley committed was treason. And the penalty for treason would be death or execution. Now, we know that's code words for Donald Trump saying that Mark Milley's not my friend anymore, so you dumb Trump-la-fucks, take note. I think he should be executed. Now, nobody's going to do that. I'm sure Mark Milley's got plenty of protection, and Donald Trump's losing ground every day. Maybe a few nutcases might do some things that he wants them to do, but the vast majority of the people are tired of being put in jail and tired of listening to the bullshit. Donald Trump's base is starting to dwindle. He still has quite a number of folks, but it's slipping away. There's no question about it. So here's the thing. When you go online and you threaten the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with death, isn't that a little over the line? Isn't that something that should, I don't know, create some kind of accountability? Isn't that the point when that should happen? I mean, remember, there was this woman, I can't remember where she was, but she had threatened to kill Judge Chutkan, right? What happened to her? Well, she had the FBI knocking on her door within a day or two, hauling her away to jail. If you or I made a threat against Donald Trump, against Jim Jordan, Lauren Boebert, any government official, what do you think would happen? They'd be at our doorstep talking to us and hauling us away. So I'm really wondering when that line will be considered crossed and when they will do something about it. I'm a little disappointed in Judge Chutkan. McAfee's relatively new to the situation, so we'll see what he does. But something has to be done because everything he's doing is dangerous, is precipitating violence, that sort of thing. So we have to wonder when that's going to happen, when something is going to be done. We got to be getting close. We have to be. But we still have yet to see anything. So I'm just venting here. I'm a little pissed off about it. Somebody's got to be accountable for some things. And up to this point, Donald Trump has not been held accountable for the shit he says. Now, that said, he is accountable in the sense that he's got 4 indictments, 91 charges. And that accountability is coming. But we can't let him run rogue while we're waiting to put him on trial and convicting him, because all the time that he has freedom of speech that isn't really legal because he's been warned about it, that puts out potential violence in this country. That is troubling, really fucking troubling. So we'll see what happens. All right, I have a number of emails to get to today. First one comes from Denise. Now, you remember Denise. It's been a while since she's been on the air, but she's the woman that specializes in history and comparing history to what's going on now. I know you remember her because even to this point, she has the record for the most number of listens to any show I've done. And keep in mind, I've done over 800 shows. She has the top listenership the day she was the guest. And this is what she says. Hi, Mike. I owe you an apology. I was supposed to be on your show, and then I got sick and never rescheduled. I'm really sorry about that. I do want to be on. I just need to figure out my schedule. Denise, there's no reason you have to apologize. People have shit to do. People get sick. And we run kind of a free and easy, loosey-goosey ship here. Somebody calls me or emails me on a day, they might be on that same day, or maybe they're on 2 weeks from now. There is no hard and fast rules. Whatever happens, happens on the day or the moment I do the podcast. My intention was to do this one alone. I expected that would be the case. But if somebody had come along at the last minute and said, hey, could I be on the show? I'd say, sure. And then it would be a totally different situation, I should say. So no need to apologize. Anyway, she goes on to say, I heard your podcast from yesterday and just wanted to add some insight. Jace asked why Matt Gaetz has it out for Kevin, and that is because Matt felt when all that stuff came out about him and the young girls, he felt Kevin did not stand up for him enough. So he hates Kevin. Well, why would Kevin stand up for him if the motherfucker's guilty? I guess that's how Republicans run. Next up, she says, now to add Kristen Welker. She's the woman that interviewed Donald Trump on NBC. Denise says she is a Trumper. It came out in the January 6th hearing. She was texting members of Congress and some of the Proud Boys. Somehow that story got lost, but make no mistake, she is on Trump's side. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I watched her in that interview, just bits and pieces, I was disappointed. I don't think she did a very good job. In fact, I think in some ways she did a worse job than Caitlin Collins. And I find that incredibly stupid. She saw the beating that Caitlin Collins took. You would think she'd learn from that experience and do better when she got the chance. And I don't think she really did. Denise goes on to say, I know that a government shutdown would be bad. Did you know that essential workers have to show up to work but not get paid? That is absolutely ridiculous and needs to be a bigger story because Republicans really are heartless bastards. There is new reporting that Trump may have bought a handgun at a gun show in North Carolina over the weekend. Apparently, his ugly mug is carved on the grip and it says 45 on the barrel. His team is not exactly confirming this because it would be impossible he broke a law, or that it would be possible that he broke a law for transporting a firearm while under indictment. The news gets crazier by the day. It's so exhausting. Thank you for doing your podcast. It keeps me sane and calm. Thanks, Denise. Now, John has a short email here, and it kind of carries over on what Denise was talking about. Good evening, Mike. It's circulating on TikTok that Trump bought a gun at a gun show. If that's true, he broke a law worse than what Hunter Biden is accused of. John. Yeah, he went to some outdoor marketplace or something like that. I saw the video, and he was looking at a gun, as Denise said, had a carving of his face on the hand grip and the number 45 up near the barrel. And I'm sure Donald Trump was sufficiently impressed. And there might have been some talk about buying the gun. I don't think he did. And here's two reasons why. First of all, you're right. That would be illegal. He would be breaking a law. You cannot buy a gun while you're charged with felonies. You can't. And you would think Donald Trump has enough problems without having to get involved in that situation. I'm not saying he's not dumb enough to do it, but I have to believe his handlers would say, yeah, you know what, we're not doing that. But more importantly, the reason I don't think he bought it is because he'd have to go in his fucking pocket and pull out money to fucking buy it. And we know Donald Trump doesn't pay anybody for fucking anything. Now, it's conceivable he bought the gun, but I don't think so. He's not the kind of guy that does well with guns or is even interested in guns. He wants his followers to have guns, but he's a coward. He's a pussy, and I don't think he bought it. However, if he did, it's going to get out. And that's just one more problem to pile on the list of felonies. All right, next email. Hi, Boomer. In terms of Biden pardoning Trump, you nicely explained why that can't and won't happen. But here's another thing. What do you think Trump would do the day after? Be gracious? No, he'd immediately begin committing crimes all over again, and he'd be at a mic calling for Biden's head. Can you imagine watching that? Oh, yeah, I can imagine it. I mean, he is a coward. He is a snake. And this is why I always tell people, when you're dealing with somebody like this, when you put them down, you've got to put them down for good, because they will end up fucking haunting you. I learned this lesson when I was a young man. You get in fights now and again. I wasn't a crazy fighter, but I dealt with a couple of bullies in my life. And I got in a fight with one. I won the fight. I started to walk away. Within 2 seconds after walking away, after assuming I won the fight, that fucker was climbing on my back. The next time I did it, I made sure this guy wasn't going anywhere. Yeah, I mean, it was kid stuff. So it wasn't anything crazy or serious, but I made sure he was hurt enough or beat down enough so that he couldn't jump on my back, that he wouldn't jump on my back. And Donald Trump is the exact kind of bully. If you give him an inch, he will exploit it. He will expand on it, and he will use it against you. This is why it's absolutely important that when we put him on trial and we convict him, we put that motherfucker in jail for a long time. Because if we don't, he will come back to haunt us. Now, this emailer goes on to say, I think either the day of or the day after Barb misled us as regarding the Mueller report, Trump was on the phone extorting Zelensky. So no, fuck that, fuck him. Couldn't agree more. Regarding the comparisons to BLM, how ridiculous. If black folks weren't infinitely more gracious than Trump-fucks, they would have burnt this place to the ground many times over for the bullshit they've had to endure. But it is turning. Accountability is coming. And now, with assists from your podcast, I'm enjoying it immensely. Best, Garage Door Jeff. George Floyd. Regarding George Floyd, Boomer, I don't know if you ever had a knee on your neck. It's excruciating. I lasted 30 seconds. That man went through hell. No, I've never had somebody put their knee on my neck. And under normal circumstances, I would never allow that to happen. Of course, when you're dealing with the police and they have guns, that's a much different situation. But I can only imagine. You sat and you watched George Floyd's life leave his body. The audacity of some people to suggest that George Floyd got what was coming to him. I really want to punch those people, because they're either immensely racist, or immensely stupid, or a combination thereof. Thank you, Garage Door Jeff. I appreciate it. Next up, this emailer says, Mr. Boomer. You don't have to call me Mr. You can call me Mike or Boomer or whatever. And actually, the boomer term, nobody's ever called me Boomer until I got on TikTok and the podcast. As I've always said, I'm not the rational boomer. I'm one of many rational boomers. It's really a name for the group than it is a name for me. Like I say, I'm not the rational boomer. I'm a rational boomer. Anyway, this emailer goes on to say, I enjoy listening to your worldview. My wife does not because of your colorful language. I get it. Then again, she is a Republican conservative from West Michigan. Well, then fuck her. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I don't mean to disrespect your wife. I'm just joking here. You get it. She even voted for Biden over Trump. Well, that I respect her for. I respect her for making the wise choice there. He goes on to say, I love how you hit back and call out our officials on both sides. I'm from New Jersey, and yes, Menendez should allow our government or governor to replace him. My biggest and long-term concerns are the future of our democracy and its challenges, domestic and abroad, Ukraine in particular. So much, and thank you for your service. Thank you so much, and thank you for your service to your children's children. John. Well, thank you, John. Thank you for doing the same. I mean, I think that's what we got to consider. I've said this before. My life is pretty well set. It's going to be what it's going to be. I've established myself as to who I am and what I am, and I'm not working at a job anymore. I have nobody telling me what to do. So I'm going to be able to coast till about, I don't know, 85 or something like that. But for my kids and my grandkids, I look at them and I don't envy them because I know what's ahead. I know what's ahead may be worse than what I dealt with. And honestly, if I had the ability to time travel, I wouldn't go back. I don't want to go through all those things again. Yes, there were plenty of positive things, but life is hard. It's hard. It would be even harder if I knew what was coming. The anticipation of something that's imminent, I don't want to deal with that shit. It's bad enough we get surprised with things in our life and we have to react and have to do things. But can you imagine how much harder it would be if you knew a big problem was ahead and you had to anticipate it up until the time it hit you? I don't want any part of that shit. All right, the next email. Good morning, Mike. I just had to write in about Lauren Boebert, aka Bobo the Hobo. She is the epitome of the GOP rules for thee, not for me. Never taking accountability for her own actions and projecting their own flaws onto everyone else. Her excuses are weak and offensive to women that are trying to date in today's world. I was in a 17-year relationship which ended, and when I began dating around 36, which is her age, I can't recall first date obligations being felt up at all. Yeah, that's kind of quick, let alone in a public place. But this is what you get when you elect GED Barbie into our government. I won't speak about being a young mother, as I became a mother at 18. But I just can't get over this skank of Congress assuming people are as dumb as she is. My parents have a saying in situations like this, and I think it's fitting. With all the available footage, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Just had to get that out. Take care, Ebony, or Eb. Thank you, Ebony. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is commonplace with all Republicans. I mean, it's audacity, if it's nothing else. And that is to commit some kind of crime or some kind of misdeed, having all seen it, and then say, oh, that never happened. This is what happened. The scary thing is some people will buy into it, whether they believe it or not. they will support it because it supports their agenda. It reminds me of a story my wife told me when she was teaching, and this happened quite a bit. And, a kid would do something that would get him in trouble. You'd miss recess or whatever the punishment was. And my wife will have witnessed the actual act that got him in trouble. So the parents would come to school and, why can't my kid go to recess? And she would say, well, he did this. And the parent would say, well, my son says he didn't do it. My wife would say, well, that's fine, but I saw him do it. No, he didn't do it. They insisted and they pushed that he didn't do it based on the kid's word. I don't know when this all changed, because when I was a kid, if I did something wrong and my mom went down to talk to the teacher and the teacher said, he did this, my mom would look at me and she would look at the teacher and say, yeah, I can see him doing that. She'd grab me by the ear, take me home, get out the spatula, and get down to business. This is the problem with our education. Our education system has been co-opted by parents. The school districts are afraid to push back against parents. So the parents have free reign to decide whatever happens in the school. And unfortunately, in this country, I think 99% of the problems we have in this country can track back to shitty parents. So if you have shitty parents controlling your school, you have a shitty school. And unfortunately, that's happening more and more. We're getting a shortage of teachers. And that's part of the reason. They have no support from the district. They just throw them out there, leave them twisting in the wind, and they're fucked. So it's impossible for them to do the job they were hired for, and that's teaching kids. They're dealing with fuckhead kids trying to teach everybody else, but they can't because the fuckhead kids are taking up too much of the attention. It's unbelievable. All right. We're moving through the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for joining me too. It's funny. I watched the Rational Boomer podcast and how many listeners we have, and it seems to continually go up. As I've said, I've done 825 or 26 podcasts. Doesn't seem like that many, but that's what it's been. And obviously, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy having the guest when I'm lucky enough to have them, but I'm happy to do them alone too. I always tell people, they say, you're a good talker. And I said, well, yeah, it's more quantity than quality for me. I can talk forever. There's no question about that. And it's not always the highest quality, but I do my best. And that's all I can give you when I come to the Rational Boomer podcast. I'll fill up the hour or then some. And I'll try to be as quality conscious as possible. But there's some days, it's weird is those days that I feel like I did not do a good job because I knew how I felt. I wasn't really up to my normal standards. It seems inevitably that I'll get notes going, oh, this is a great show, one of your best shows. And I'm going, where does that come from? I know it wasn't a great show. I can't be up every goddamn time. Anyway, there's a lot going on in this country, and it's really hard to keep track of everything. That's why I feel very fortunate that I have the emailers. You emailers, we've had a number of mailers keep me on track, and Lisa was helping me out when I was on vacation by giving me bits of information. The emails I get oftentimes inform me of things I'm maybe not aware of. This next email comes from KCT. He says, a national level rinse and repeat. Some quotes endure history much better than others. Here's one quote. You can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. That comes to us from Winston Churchill. That's pretty fucking accurate, isn't it? Email continues. Here we go, as expected, defiantly, arrogantly throwing everything imaginable against the walls of our politics, courts, media, news, justice system, schools, laws, religion, government, etc., all the while expecting our own unique individual flavors to be the only ones that stick. We regularly go deep into the I, me, my mentality. Damn everything or anyone else just to accommodate me and those like me. As it turns out, we slowly discovering this narrow mindset will never work. We should hold on a second, I'm lost here. As it turns out, we slowly discovering this narrow mindset will never work. We should never really carve out an ideal existence for just some of us. We must consider all of us. We must always think, plan, and apply the principles of this nation equally to all of us. Anything less, as predicted, will fail. Now, our attempts of divisiveness are the national level illustration of the rinse and repeat. I pray for the day that the nation that professes liberty and justice for all will turn the corner and actually be that nation it claims to be. Couldn't agree more. You know, back when I was in business, I dealt with a similar situation. I was brokering truckloads of shit, okay? And you had people selling and you had people buying. And each one of them were only concerned about their own needs and desires. So when these people would get together, it ended up being contentious, and a lot of deals never got done because they could never come to terms. And if the deals got done, they were so mad at these people they never did deals ever again, which I thought was an absolute waste. So as a middleman, instead of siding with one or the other, I never did that. I pretty much was tough on both sides. If you had a seller that was asking a ridiculous amount, I'd point it out and tell them, if you don't want to sell this shit, I don't have time for you. And if the buyer wanted to pay a ridiculous price, I said, look, if you're not serious about this shit, go the fuck away. And that's what it took. It took somebody in the middle with hopefully a reasonable mind to say, you can't do business like that. And if you do business like that, you're going to fuck yourself over because these people will never deal with you again. How about instead just charge what is reasonable, the reasonable profit that you want to make? And how about the buyer just pay what is reasonable for him to pay instead of trying to game every system? You know, that's a situation. That's the thing. I often said it wasn't even about the money as much as I want the win. And that's what we have in our government today. It took somebody like me in those situations to cause each side to have more reasonable minds, because I said, look, if you don't, you can fuck off and go away. I don't want anything to do with you. This deal won't get done and you will never deal with me again. And fortunately, I had a pretty good reputation of putting together deals, and they didn't want that either. So they had to conform ultimately. And that's what we need in this country. Nobody seems to think they have to conform or be reasonable or be fair. They only want what they want, and if they don't get it, they're going to fucking pout and cry and act a fool. How do we fix that in this country? I don't exactly know. It would be nice if people just realized what's reasonable and what's fair and just do that instead of trying to be that fuck that tries to get everything. All right, the next email. Hey, Mike, the Texas Tribune, which I have referenced in the past, has an annual festival where they have various speakers. And this year, Cancun Cruz was a guest speaker, Ted Cruz. As you'd expect, he was spreading his BS, claiming others left during the ice storm in 2021 when he took off to Cancun. But how many left their dog behind? Good point. I've always said I like all dogs better than most people. He also claimed Democrats only hate Clarence Thomas because he's a conservative who is also a minority. No, we hate him because he's a grifting piece of shit. Now, he was ignoring his corruption as always. He also claimed school vouchers are a civil rights issue, to which the crowd laughed, and he'll gladly campaign against Republicans who are against him. He should worry about saving his own ass in next year's election. And he said he was like Switzerland for 2024 election. Really, bitch? Could that be because it's an election year for him and he's got some serious challengers? Hopefully, beating Ted is a big step towards flipping Texas. Dems are tired of being in the minority and they want to target go along Democrats who also vote with Republicans. Republicans are in a civil war as Abbott is calling a special session in October to pass his voucher BS. Things are not rosy between the House and the Senate, as there is a lot of bad feelings between the House who voted to impeach Paxton and a Senate that let him go. Both are controlled by Republicans, and it's going to be fun to watch. I hope Democrats can use this to capture some seats. Would love to see Top Snake Abbott have to deal with Democrats. Keep up the great work. Great to hear, Old Soul. So glad you let me be her opening act the night before she came on, and would not have wanted to follow her. Ha ha ha. Take care. Jace from hopefully rid of lying Ted soon, Texas. Thank you, Jace. Yeah, he's our Texas correspondent. And it would be interesting if the Democrats somehow got control. Those Republicans are holding on for dear life, though. They're not going to give it up easy. I don't know how these people win, Greg Abbott or Ted Cruz. The one thing I will tell you, I was looking at some weather forecasts, and we've got an El Nino, and I don't really know what that means. Sometimes that means we have easier winters here in the Midwest. But it's suggesting that there may be really cold weather down in Texas. Now, if that's the case, we have to worry about the grid again. And I'm not hoping for any failures of the grid, but I got to tell you, if there is a failure, I don't know if Abbott is going to survive this time. What happened down in Texas during that winter when they lost electrical power was tragic. People were injured, people died, and people were inconvenienced to crazy amounts. We've got to find a way to get Greg Abbott out of there. He is an absolute pile of shit. And as long as he's in charge of Texas and we have a Republican legislature, much like Florida, Texas is going to be a shithole state. And that's sad to say because there's plenty of places in Texas that are beautiful, plenty of people in Texas that are wonderful folks. But when you have people like you have now running that state, it's not a good thing. It's not a good place to be. All right. The next one says, "Hey, Boomer, I listen to your podcast when I'm working and it helps me get through the day, and your TikToks and Instagrams. I check those every day. A couple of things. Have you heard about the McCarthy Act? My constituents can't afford rebellious tantrums. Handle your shutdown act." This is for those fuck publicans that vote for the shutdown to happen. They're the ones that shouldn't get paid at all. Effective immediately when the government shuts down. Another thing is that we, the people, should vote for the SCOTUS judges for 2-year or 4-year terms. Fuck this lifetime term bullshit. This will eliminate all of the corruption in the SCOTUS. And I love to come on your podcast, and you can try this experiment on me. Whenever I do a podcast, you sprinkle in a few emails and we can talk about them. It's your show and you can do whatever you see fit. Fuck Donald Trump, aka Triple D, and MTG and the Trumplefucks are so stupid they can't find their asses with both hands. I love Old Soul. Now she has another fan. Thank you for keeping me informed, and I'm spreading the word to my friends about you. You know how to put a smile on my face. Thanks, Gene. Well, Gene, you're welcome on the show anytime. I've said that before. And the idea of sprinkling in emails when I have a guest, that may end up have to happen because I'm getting enough emails where if I have a couple of guest ons over a couple of shows, I have a long list of emails. Like today, I have a bunch of emails, and I didn't even have a guest. So the emails are coming in strong, and I appreciate that. Don't let up on that. I think that's important to the show. But Gene, you're welcome on any time, and yeah, we'll put in some emails as well when you're on. All right, I think this is the last email. This is coming from D. I'm writing to ask your opinion on the predictions coming from mostly the left. I've heard from several publishers of political opinions who say that several world leaders are working behind the scenes in an attempt to cause Joe Biden to lose the next presidential election. Especially Putin and the Prince of Saudi Arabia are slowly raising gas prices to hurt the world economy, especially the U.S. economy. Some are saying that others are artificially raising the prices of other goods for the same reason. As this happens, the Fed will raise interest rates, which will hurt the people of the middle class, as well as people in poverty in the area of housing. Excuse me. I do see gas prices rising as well as food, energy, and even clothing. Please provide some commentary on this issue. D. It was interesting. Here in Minnesota, we're looking at gas prices right around $4, which is high. But when I was down in Savannah, Georgia, gas prices were between, I don't know, $3.30 and $3.50. I don't know why there's a difference there, but there is. But you're absolutely right. People like Vladimir Putin and the Prince of Saudi Arabia, MSB or whatever the fuck they call him, they do support Donald Trump. So they will try different ways to make Joe Biden look bad. They did it in 2016. They did it in 2020. However, it can only work so much. Whenever I have somebody come to me and say, I don't want to vote for Joe Biden, gas prices are too high, inflation is this, inflation is that. Fact of the matter is, nobody's done more for this country in the period of time of 3 years than Joe Biden. There's no question. When you look at the polls, it sounds like nobody recognizes that, but we've got to fuck the polls. The polls aren't even worth listening to because first you got to find out who's supporting financially those polls and who they're calling and what the questions are, because you can jerry rig the questions to get the answers you want. That's why I don't care about polls. They're just as corrupt as anything else the Republicans are doing. Yeah, they're probably doing this, but this is what I would say to somebody who says, well, I can't vote for Joe Biden because the gas prices are high. Then I would say, okay, you can't vote for Joe Biden because the gas prices are too high. So tell me this, instead of voting for Joe Biden because of gas prices, are you telling me then you're going to vote for a candidate or a party that attempted to overthrow this government, that has been corrupt and criminal from day one, that did absolutely nothing when they had the power in the House of Representatives? You're worried about Joe Biden not doing some things that would make you happy. Well, tell me what the Republicans have done in the House of Representatives to help fix the things you're bitching about. They have done fucking zero. They have done zero. I told this fact in a previous podcast. From June 24th to September 11th, the House of Representatives was in session for 11 days. And in those 11 days, they spent most of the time looking for ways to impeach Joe Biden. All the while, we have this impending doom coming up at the end of the month where the government may be shut down if they can't come to terms on appropriations and bills and the budget and all that shit. So you don't like Joe Biden in spite of the fact that he's getting things done. So instead, you want to vote for the Republicans, trying to destroy this country, trying to destroy our form of government, and then on top of it, doing nothing. That's your call? Well, that's just fucking stupid. And if you're going to vote Republican, clearly you must be stupid. So this is what I would tell you. Anybody tells you that, just tell them they're fucking stupid. And if you need to, you just tell them Rational Boomer told them is stupid. And if he or she wants to debate it, they're welcome on the show. I'm about due, and I'm irritated enough by Trumplafucks that it would be fun to tear one up now and again. They're not willing to come on the show though. They know what's going to happen, because they have no basis in facts. They don't know anything about the truth or the law or anything like that. They just want to spew their shit. And if somebody's out there that is taken in by the shit they spew, well, you're just not bright enough to even have the privilege of fucking voting. Now, you're going to get to vote, but forgive me if I don't respect you and I think you're stupid. And you're more than welcome to come on the show and prove me wrong. But you won't come because you're gutless, pussy ass bitches. D, there's only so much we can do. We can only do what we can do, so that's what we focus on. We push as hard as we can, and the chips fall where they may. It goes back to something I've said before. If you can teach yourself not to worry about things you can't control, life gets a lot easier. Just do the best you can do. And I think I learned that in sports. You know, you're on a football team or a baseball team. Team may not be playing as well, like our Minnesota Vikings, who are now 0-3. And say you're playing left guard, okay? You can worry about the team and all the things that are going wrong with the team, but there's nothing you can do about it. So the only thing you can do is make sure you do your job to the best of your ability. Then at least you can say you've done all you can. If it helps and it works, great. Now, if everybody had that attitude, you'd have a better team. So instead of taking everything on our shoulders, let's just do those things that we know we can do and do it as well as we possibly can. All right, we are going to take a quick break and we will be right back. So, one of the big stories over the weekend was about Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. Bob Menendez was indicted for bribery, among other things. His home was raided. And Bob is a lot like a Republican. Even in the face of absolute evidence, he will deny, like the previous emailer said, don't believe your lying eyes, believe what I tell you. It's interesting about Bob Menendez. There's only been 13 senators in the history of this country that have been indicted. Bob Menendez has been indicted or gotten in trouble like this twice. This is his second run at this. Apparently, he went through it, got away with it, and just said, I'm going to keep doing it because apparently I'm untouchable. I think he may have run up against a moment in time when accountability isn't too far away. Now, on Monday, Bob Menendez claimed that he would neither resign or cease running for re-election after he was indicted on corruption charges just Friday. Says, I'm not going to resign, and I'm going to keep running like you have a chance. Now, a lot of Democratic members of Congress have said, dude, you got to fucking resign. His governor of his state has said, dude, you got to fucking resign, but he's not going to do it. Now, he stated that those calling for his resignation have rushed to judgment on a limited set of facts, Menendez declared in a press conference. I will be exonerated and continue to be the senior senator from New Jersey. Yeah, we just rushed to judgment, and we're only dealing with limited facts. Really? So, would you say that when they stormed your house and raided your house and they found $100,000 in gold bars, that was a rush to judgment? That's a normal thing to have? Or $480,000 in cash just laying around? Oh, and don't forget about the free Mercedes that you got. That's limited information. I don't know about you, but that's enough information for me. If I see a politician who's got $100,000 in gold bars, $480,000 in cash, and a brand new Mercedes, I don't know. That's a red flag to me. Now, the district attorney for the Southern District of New York indicted Menendez and his wife Nadine for allegedly accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, checks, and gold bars and a Mercedes-Benz in exchange for aiding the Egyptian government obtain military aid that was being withheld due to accusations of human rights violations. Menendez and his wife are also alleged to have used his position to help 3 New Jersey businessmen in their business dealings in Egypt and to evade state and federal prosecution. Well, Bobby, you've been a naughty boy, and it doesn't sound like I don't have enough information. Just reading what I just saw, yeah, you're guilty as fuck. And you've done this before, so I don't know, what the fuck am I supposed to think? Menendez defended the hundreds of thousands in cash allegedly found stashed in his home in clothes and envelopes and said it came from his personal savings account. Well, my, oh my. He says, for 30 years, I have withdrawn thousands of dollars in cash from my personal savings account, which I have kept for emergencies and because of the history of my family facing confiscation in Cuba, Menendez says. $480,000 over 30 years. What is that? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of fucking money. I'm just going to do the math here. $480,000 divided by 30, that's $16,000 a year. And over those 30 years, you've never touched that money. You're worried about your family facing confiscation in Cuba. So you've set this money aside for them, but in 30 years, it's never happened. Did it ever occur to you? Oh, I don't know. We could keep it in a bank. No, that would be a money trail, a digital trail, or whatever. This is bullshit, and everybody knows it's bullshit. And Menendez needs to go. I don't care if he's a Democrat. He's obviously corrupt criminal. He's a fucking thief, and he's not good for this country. Now, the indictment, however, notes that the cash-filled envelopes found by federal agents in Menendez's home bore the fingerprints and DNA of one of the New Jersey businessmen who allegedly provided the money as a bribe. How are you going to explain that one away, Menendez? Menendez, of course, did not address the gold bars that were originally purchased by another businessman, nor did he address the Mercedes-Benz purchased for his wife by a third businessman. Here's the deal. Mercedes are expensive, right? But you got $480,000 in cash in your fucking bedroom. Why don't you grab 50, 60 of it and just go buy your wife a car on your own with cash? But no, it would had to be purchased by a businessman. You see how that might be a red flag? You see how that might be concerning? Now, as I said, this is Menendez's second corruption indictment in the past 8 years. He was previously indicted in 2015 for allegedly pressuring the Department of Health and Human Services to drop a Medicare fraud investigation into Dr. Solomon Melgen in exchange for campaign donations and gifts like luxury travel. Maybe he's traveling with Clarence and hotel accommodations. The case ended in a hung jury in 2017. The Senate Ethics Committee admonished Menendez in 2018 for actions that reflected discredit upon the Senate. So what's he do? He does it again. He's an arrogant fuck that thinks he can get away with anything. Now, Menendez's defiant declaration that he would not step aside comes after most of the New Jersey Democratic Party establishment called for his resignation. 7 of the state's 9-member Democratic Party House delegation called for Menendez to resign. The only member to defend Menendez is his son, Representative Rob Menendez. Oh, great. Your son's in there too. That's perfect. They're joined by Governor Phil Murphy, State Assembly Leader Craig Coughlin, State Senate President Nicholas Scutari, Democratic State Chair Leroy Jones, and numerous county party leaders. Now, Representative Andy Kim, who represents a hotly contested swing seat in the southern New Jersey area, announced Saturday that he would launch a primary campaign against Menendez. Menendez claimed that these elected lawmakers have rushed to judgment because they see political benefit for themselves or somebody around them. So far, Menendez's Senate colleagues have remained mum. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he would let the prosecution play out. Senator John Fetterman is the only senator who joined calls for Menendez to resign. After Menendez's press conference, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, the chief campaign arm of the Senate, Republicans attacked Schumer and other Democrats for remaining totally silent on the stunning accusations. I saw a story too, and I don't know what to make of it. Maybe they're making much ado about nothing. But there is another New Jersey political leader I think most of us have liked over the past years, but he's said absolutely nothing. And I'm talking about Cory Booker. He said absolutely nothing about this situation. Is he just trying to stay out of it? Is he concerned about something? I don't know. See, at this point, I don't trust fucking anybody in Congress. Nobody. They all have the potential to be corrupt and criminal. Clearly, it's mostly Republicans, but in this case, we see it's a Democrat. And if we find out there are other Democrats grifting and stealing and taking bribes, I would not be surprised. But I think we're at a point now in this country that more and more of these corrupt fucks are going to be exposed. I think we're at a turning point in this country where people are getting tired of it and people are looking into these claims that they may have turned away from in the past because they were powerful leaders. Well, we're going after the former president of the United States, and that means nobody is safe anymore. You can't just commit crimes and expect to get away with it. All right. Now, Cassidy Hutchinson was interviewed on Rachel Maddow's show last night, and it was interesting. And I got to tell you, Cassidy Hutchinson, I was very impressed with her when she testified in front of the January 6th committee. But I'm even more impressed with her when I see her on television now. She wrote a book called Enough, and it talks about a lot of shit. I'm going to tell you about a couple things here in a moment, but she is very poised. You think about the things she did, things you'll read in this book, when she was working in the White House as chief of staff to Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. She was only 24 years old at the time. And when it came down to somebody having to tell the truth and testify, she was the only one. The only one. And it's kind of interesting. She thought of this on her own. She saw a story about Alexander Butterfield. Back in the Nixon days, he's the one that said, "Oh yeah, they're tapes." The interesting thing, a part of it is that the position that Cassidy Hutchinson held when she was in the White House is the very same position that Alexander Butterfield had. And he pretty much brought down Nixon. So it's intriguing that Cassidy Hutchinson would be the one person telling the fucking truth. She was so intrigued and knew so much about history that she sought Alexander Butterfield out. He's like in his 90s now, and they had a nice conversation and became friends. But both of these two will be remembered for doing the right things when everybody else chose not to. Now, an interesting story, a funny story. Hutchinson wrote in her new book that Meadows burned so many files in his home's fireplace that his wife shared her frustration about the high cost of having to dry clean his suits to rid them of the bonfire smell. You remember she talked about Mark Meadows burning documents. Now, we don't know what those documents are, but what other reason to burn documents unless they were illegal to have, meaning classified documents? But his wife he burned so much shit that his wife had to get his suits dry cleaned because they smelled like he was at a fucking bonfire. Now, her memoir, Enough, is set to hit the bookstands today. And of course, Hutchinson's best known for testimony in front of the House Select Committee. Of course, Donald Trump and all his little Trumplafucks are trying to discredit her, but they aren't doing a very good job. I think I read people pretty well, and it's easy to see Donald Trump, Mark Meadows, all the Trumplafucks. You can tell when they're lying because they're not very good at it. But if you watch Cassidy Hutchinson, here's a young woman that's smarter than her years, very articulate, and I believe her. I think everybody believes her. She came out with some other info that Rudy Giuliani groped her. Rudy Giuliani says, "Do I look like somebody that would grope somebody?" "Yeah, motherfucker, you do. You look exactly like the guy that would grope a young woman." So I'm buying that too. I believe Cassidy Hutchinson in this situation. Now, Cassidy also told a story about Matt Gaetz, how he kept trying to follow her around. One time they were at Camp David. He tried to get back to her cabin and she kind of admonished him. It was brought up to Matt Gaetz about how she responded to it. And he said, "Well, you have to understand, Cassidy and I dated for a few months." They went back to Cassidy. They played that video. They went back to Cassidy, and Cassidy was kind of smirking. And she said, Matt Gaetz and I knew each other, and we were even friendly for a certain period of time. But I promise you this, I always thought he was kind of sketchy. I don't think he treated women very well. And I never, ever dated Matt Gaetz. I'd like to see him respond to that. I bet he doesn't. Now, Cassidy Hutchinson made a point. With all these people trying to discredit her, she said, "What would I have to gain by coming forward?" It's a good point. She's 24 years old, has no power. Everybody else is scared to death of Donald Trump and all the Trumplafucks. If anybody had a reason not to come forward, it would be her. But she has something that a lot of these Trumplafucks don't have. That is a conscience. That is somebody who respects the United States of America. She respects truth and the rule of law. And that's pretty impressive for a young woman like that. It's easy to be scared when you're in that situation. You got nobody. She had no money at the time. She was almost broke, but she still decided to testify. And fortunately, she's been safe. And now she's got a book. She's going to have some money, and she's going to get even more confident. And when this book comes out, it is going to piss off a lot of Trumplafucks. She said, "It would have been easier for me to continue being complicit and to stay in the comfortable zone." During her appearance before the House panel, Hutchinson revealed Meadows had warned things might get real, real bad on January 6th, and recounted being told that Trump got into a physical altercation with the Secret Service when he tried to grab the wheel so he could go to the state capitol or the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Now, along with her congressional testimony, Hutchinson has answered questions before the Washington, D.C. grand jury probing the former president's scheme to undermine Joe Biden's win and the Fulton County body investigating Trump's efforts to undo the 2020 election in Georgia. However, it's not clear whether her testimony contributed to him getting indicted in either case, but I think you can bet that she's likely to be a witness in one or both of these trials that are upcoming. I've read excerpts of the book, and it's pretty compelling. I would suggest you read the book. I'm going to read the whole book because there's a lot of information there that we may not have known, or at least she's expanded on things we heard about but didn't know all the facts. Again, she's a very brave young woman. She's a smart young woman, and she's articulate. And as much as she was being used and abused at the time, I think she's going to be okay. And dare I say, I think this book is going to be successful, and I think she's going to land on her feet with no problem. She's an attractive young woman. She could end up on TV. She could be writing a series of books, depending on how this one goes. She's going to be just fine. And guess what? She's only 27 years old. She's got her whole life in front of her, and she made the right choice. Had she decided to become complicit, it may have ruined her life. So kudos to a very smart young woman. Now, we talked about Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley, who was accused by former President Donald Trump of being worthy of execution for treason. He is owed a debt of gratitude from the country, according to Mark Esper, who was the defense secretary for Donald Trump. The former secretary defended Milley's actions for calling the Chinese government to smooth over relations in the waning days of the Trump administration. Now, Trump would have you believe that he was calling Chinese officials covertly and putting this country in danger. Well, that's quite the opposite of what really happened. Now, Esper said, well, first of all, that statement by the president is horrible. It's intolerable. It should be condemned by everybody, right, left, Republican, Democrat, right? And remember, this is coming from a Republican. This is coming from his former defense secretary. He goes on to say, one of the two events that I think the president referenced was a call he made to China in October 2020, where he warned them, if you will. I think the allegation is that he gave them information or something. But Esper said he had reached out to the Chinese first due to concerns about how they were taking some of Trump's rhetoric. And my view was I did not want a mishap and imperception to lead to some kind of conflict in the South China Sea between the United States and China. And that's what I heard all along. Chinese are calling Mark Milley saying, what the fuck is going on? We're nervous. And Mark Milley had to placate them and make them feel comfortable. Esper goes on to say, that's the last thing we wanted, and it was in a separate meeting that I directed General Milley to reach out to his counterpart as well to send the same message that nothing going on here. We have no aims against you, that it's going to be steady as she goes. And that's what we did typically in these types of situations. Remember, a lot of people were concerned, Nancy Pelosi was concerned, that Donald Trump would get us in a war in order to try to stay in power. And that was certainly on his mind. But fortunately, cooler minds prevailed, more intelligent minds prevailed, like that of Milley or Esper. Now, he conveyed the message, but somehow it got portrayed that he was a rogue general acting on his own and sent wrong messages to the Chinese. And again, it's an incomplete story. Mark Milley did what I directed him to do. He did what other chairmen had done in the past, which I think is responsible, diplomacy and statecraft to prevent mishaps from happening. Now, Esper, again, his former defense secretary, Trump's, condemned former President Trump for a statement saying Milley and other service members are owed a debt of gratitude, not condemnation, and certainly not the type of rhetoric coming out of no less than the President of the United States. Now, Milley is set to retire at the end of the week after more than 40 years' service. It's what Donald Trump does. He creates chaos. He creates uncertainty, even when it's absolutely fucking stupid, as in this case. There will be people, Trump-la-fucks, that believe this bullshit. But it's just not true, as is the case with everything that Donald Trump says. Excuse me. I've had this cold, not a cold, it's just this cough every now and again. All right. Here's another story I've been wanting to talk about because it pisses me off. A stunning new poll shows President Joe Biden facing a shocking deficit to former President Donald Trump in a hypothetical head-to-head 2024 showdown. Now, the Washington Post ABC News poll put out Sunday found Biden's disapproval ratings have reached a low point in multiple categories, particularly with the economy and immigration. The most stark numbers, though, were reflected in Trump-Biden matchup, which showed the current president trailing his predecessor by a whopping 10 points, 52 to 42. The Post itself acknowledged the most polls show the two neck and neck and called it its own survey an outlier, but that didn't stop the former president from shouting from the rooftops. If you question this poll, why do you fucking publish it? You do it to cause drama and discourse and get people to pay more attention to you. It's fucking absurd. Now, the polls showed overwhelming disapproval for Biden on income and prices for gas and food. On the whole, the president is facing a 64% disapproval rating on the economy and 62% disapproval for his administration, or how his administration has handled the situation on the southern border. The poll also reaffirmed recent concerns about Biden's age, noting that the matter seemed to apply more towards Biden than Trump, despite the fact that both would be well in their 80s at the conclusion of the presidency, should either one of them win in 2024. The issue of age affects perceptions for both of them, though more often with Biden, who would be 82 at the start of the second term, while Trump would be 78. Overall, 74% of the adults say the president would be too old to serve another term, while 50% say that of Trump. A near majority of Americans, 48%, say both men are too old to serve another term. Nearly a quarter, 23%, say neither is too old. Roughly similar percentages of Democrats and independents say both men would be too old, while a slim majority of Republicans say only Biden is too old. Now, here's the thing. I really get annoyed by these polls because they mean absolutely nothing. We know polls told us there would be a red wave in 2022. We know these same polls said that Hillary Clinton would win in a walk in 2016. Here's what you have to understand about these polls. You have to know who is funding these polls, who's behind it. We know at least one poll that came out was owned and funded by a guy who is a Trump donor. Can we take that as credible? I don't think so. Secondly, who are they polling? How are they polling? And what questions are they asking? They're talking about disapproval ratings, and then they'll turn it around and say, well, this means more people like Trump than Biden. It's absolute bullshit. There is absolutely no way that can happen. I have a feeling that there were no young people that were polled in this situation. We know that the millennials and the Gen Zs will likely play a big role in 2024, will be the majority of the voters in 2028. My guess is that not too many young people read the Washington Post. So if all you're talking to is old white people, yeah, you might get that kind of result. So polls are very subjective. They don't mean shit. I haven't been confident about any poll, and that's why if they're bad polls for Biden, I don't trust them, and if they're good polls for Biden, I don't trust them. I don't trust them either way because they're so often inaccurate or just flat out wrong. That's it. That's fucking it. And so people are all upset about this. And I just want to warn you, don't listen to the polls. First of all, we got a long way to go before the election. And between now and the election, a lot of shit is going to go down. Chances are Donald Trump will have been convicted of one crime or another, or maybe multiple crimes. And that changes the whole perception of everything. A lot of evidence is going to come out. A lot of witnesses, all of whom seem to be Republicans, will come out. Donald Trump is not leading. If they had the election today, Donald Trump would not win in my mind. And I've said this 100 times before, and I'm redundant as fuck, so I'll say it again. In 2020, he lost by 7 million votes, almost 8 million votes. Okay. In that time, Donald Trump, since 2020 to now, he's done nothing but lost support, money, and voters. So please tell me how in the world he can win in 2024. Beyond that, like I say, I don't think he'll make it until the election in 2024. I'm not suggesting he's going to die or anything like that. I mean, it would be nice, but I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen. But he is going to be so fucking buried that the last thing he'll be able to do is run for president. If for no other reason, when Letitia James gets done with him and the fact that he's using all of his PAC money to pay legal fees, what money is he going to use to run for president? Where is he going to get the money for advertising and rallies and that sort of thing? It won't exist. He's going to be cemented in one spot because he'll have no fucking resources. Now, this last story was brought up in one of the emails. Former President Donald Trump visited a gun store in South Carolina on Monday where he admired a Glock handgun and said, "I want to buy one." Donald Trump says a lot of things. He says, "I'd be happy to testify in front of the January 6th committee. I'd be happy to testify at my trials," but he'll never do it. He just says shit. And the main thing is he can't even buy a gun because he's under felony indictment. Trump would actually not be allowed to purchase or possess a firearm according to federal law. And as I said before, that would mean Donald Trump would have to go into his pocket and actually pay for something. Do you really think he did that? Donald Trump didn't buy a fucking gun. He's probably scared to death of guns. He's okay with all his Trumplefucks carrying guns, but he would never carry a gun. He wouldn't know what to do with it. He'd probably do what Elmer from the Oath Keepers did. Try to be a hot shot, show it off, and then shoot his eye out. That would be kind of funny. Now, Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung said Monday on social media that the former president bought a Glock. But then another Trump spokesperson clarified that the purchase did not actually happen. Chung deleted his tweet and did not respond to a query from Huffington Post. So Stephen Chung came out and said, "Hey, this would be a good idea. This will get Donald Trump a lot of votes. Yeah, he bought a Glock, all right." And then somebody said, "Hey, dumb fuck, he'll go to jail if he bought a gun." Oh, that's right. He didn't buy a gun. A representative from Palmetto State Armory in Summerville, South Carolina, told Huffington Post that Trump visited the store on Monday, but didn't buy anything. I guarantee you he didn't buy a fucking thing. Federal law prohibits several categories of people from buying or owning guns, including people who use marijuana or any other federally criminalized drug. Does that include Adderall? Because that would limit him as well. People who have been convicted of a felony and people who have merely been charged with a felony. Trump has been charged with 91 felonies in the 2 federal and 2 state indictments against him this year. When someone buys a gun from a federally licensed dealer, the buyer has filled out a standard form from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives with a series of questions, including whether the purchaser is addicted to drugs or whether the person has been charged with a felony or crime for which a judge could levy a prison sentence longer than a year. You remember when Donald Trump went in that restaurant and he said, breakfast for everybody, I'll pay for everybody, and he didn't do it? Same kind of thing here. He's just talking shit. And the person who said he did buy it didn't know what the fuck they were talking about and had to take it back. So Donald Trump did not buy a gun. He would not buy a gun. He's a coward. And he doesn't. It's silly. It's silly. But of course, the media makes a big deal out of it. He may have bought a gun. That could be illegal. Oh, let's spend a half hour talking about Donald Trump buying a gun. He didn't buy a fucking gun. And by the way, if he did buy a gun, the crime he committed was far more egregious than what Hunter Biden is accused of. So fuck you. Fuck you. I'm tired of the bullshit in the media. We waste all this time on stupid fucking polls and lies and bullshit. That's the problem with this country. We need to focus more on truth, justice, and the rule of law. If we could do that and make sure it applies to everybody, not just us, and leaving the elite wide open to do what they want, then we can get this country back and get things straight again. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day. And of course, we'll talk to you again tomorrow.